The Muslim Boy, the Eunuch's Rise, and the War for the Throne. The Life of Zheng. He is not the story of a common sailor who rose through the ranks. It is the extraordinary, historically verifiable tale of a talented outsider who endured immense trauma to become the most trusted man in the Chinese Empire, eventually commanding the largest fleet the world had ever seen. His journey began not on the sea, but in the turmoil of a collapsing dynasty. Zheng He was born around 1371 in Yunnan province in southwestern China. His birth name was Ma He Umawa. Unlike the Han majority, Ma He was a Hui Muslim, belonging to a non-Chinese ethnic group that spoke Chinese. This heritage was central to his identity. His father and grandfather both held the title Haji, signifying they had completed the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. This exposure to global travel and Islamic culture gave Ma He a unique perspective, a natural tolerance, and linguistic abilities that few Han officials possessed. His childhood was violently interrupted by the rise of the Ming Dynasty. Yunnan was the last province to be incorporated into the new empire, founded by the ferocious Yongle Emperor Zefuya Ansahong. When the Ming army conquered Yunnan around 1381, Ma He, a boy of about 10, was captured. Following the harsh practices of the time toward captured sons of hostile military leaders, he was forcibly castrated and permanently inducted into the imperial system as a eunuch. This brutal transition stripped him of his lineage but opened an entirely new, albeit painful, path to political power in the tightly controlled imperial court. The young eunuch Ma He was assigned to the household of Prince Zhu Di, the fourth son of the Yongle Emperor and the Prince of Yan. Ma He's physical strength. He was noted for being unusually tall and strong for a eunuch, and quick intellect quickly set him apart. He proved his loyalty and military aptitude not in court intrigue, but in the field. He served as a trusted military aide, advising the prince on strategy and logistics. When the Yongle Emperor died, the throne passed to his grandson, Emperor Ji. Fearing the power of his uncles, Jianwen began a campaign to strip the regional princes of their authority. Prince Zheng He, viewing this as a mortal threat, revolted, launching a 4-year civil war known as the Jingnan Campaign, 1399-1402. Ma He was a crucial military commander during this conflict. He distinguished himself in numerous battles, especially at the crucial Battle of Qilin, where his tactical advice and personal bravery contributed significantly to Zhu Di's victory. His role was not that of a typical court eunuch, but of a high-level military strategist and logist, earning him the deep personal gratitude and trust of the prince. In 1402, Zhu Di successfully besieged the capital, Nanjing, and overthrew his nephew, whose fate remains one of the great mysteries of Chinese history. Zhu Di seized the throne and became the Yongle Emperor. The rewards for Ma He's loyalty were swift and immense, in recognition of his bravery during the campaign, particularly the Yongle Emperor bestowed upon him a new surname Zheng He, and appointed him to the extraordinary position of Grand Director, or Grand Eunuch. This rank made Zheng He one of the most powerful officials in the entire Ming court, a man entrusted with both domestic administration and military command, answering only to the emperor. This unique trust, based on shared blood and fire from the Civil War and Zheng He's status as a eunuch, meaning he could not found a competing dynasty, was the essential foundation for the great maritime expeditions that were to follow. The treasure fleet, construction, and the mandate of the emperor. Having seized the throne through civil war, the Yongle Emperor Zhu Di faced a dual crisis: a need to legitimize his rule internally, and a need to assert the might of the newly established Ming Dynasty externally. He could not rely on the traditional scholar-bureaucrats, who largely opposed his violent usurpation, to manage this massive undertaking. Instead, he turned to the man he trusted implicitly, his loyal military companion and Grand Director, Zheng He. The Emperor's decision to launch the unprecedented series of maritime expeditions, beginning in 1405, was driven by three primary historically verifiable motives, none of which were commercial colonization or territorial expansion. Ichi. None. Skewed political legitimacy. The search for the deposed Emperor Jianwen had vanished when Nanjing fell. A persistent rumor suggested he had escaped to sea. Yongle needed to either find and neutralize his nephew or, by demonstrating his global reach, prove that no hiding place was safe from his mandate. 2. The tribute system. China, under the mandate of heaven, viewed itself as the undisputed center of the civilized world. The naval expeditions were designed to restore and expand the ancient tribute system, in which foreign rulers acknowledged the superior cosmological status of the Ming Emperor by sending gifts, tribute, and receiving titles and valuable trade goods in return. This was a diplomatic mission of asserting global supremacy, not one of conquest. 3. Prestige and power projection. The expedition served as an overwhelming display of Ming China's wealth and technological superiority, asserting the global dominance of the dynasty following a period of internal strife and foreign rule. Yuan dynasty. Zheng He was the perfect choice to lead this monumental mission. As a Muslim who had completed the Hajj pilgrimage, he possessed a natural understanding of the cultures and religions of the Indian Ocean region. Furthermore, as a eunuch, he was completely reliant on the emperor. He could not use the immense wealth and power of the fleet to establish an independent political base or father a competing dynasty, thus removing the risk that plagued traditional military commanders. The scale of the project was staggering. Shipyards across China were mobilized to construct the legendary treasure fleets built. The largest of these vessels were the flagship treasure ships. While exact dimensions remain a point of academic debate due to the difficulty in interpreting Ming measurement units, they were undeniably colossal, far exceeding anything built in Europe for the next 4 centuries. Historical records suggest these ships measured over 400 feet in length, possessed 9 masts, and were constructed with double hulls and watertight compartments, a technological feat unparalleled at the time. The average fleet for each voyage consisted of over 200 vessels, divided into specific categories. Treasure ships Baoshuan, the largest, carrying envoys, tribute, and gifts. Horse ships, transporting horses, repair materials, and fresh water. Supply ships, carrying food and supplies for the vast crew. Troop transports, carrying soldiers and artillery. Each expedition carried a complement of over 27,000 to 30,000 personnel, including sailors, soldiers, interpreters. Zheng He's Muslim heritage was invaluable here. Astronomers, doctors, and diplomats. The mandate given to Zheng He was clear. He was to use peaceful diplomatic means first, presenting the Ming Emperor's gifts of silk, porcelain, and gold. However, he was also given the full military power necessary to intervene against pirates or local rulers who dared disrespect the imperial mandate. The first expedition, 1405 to 1407, set the precedent. Zheng He steered his massive fleet through Southeast Asia, reaching the crucial trading hub of Calicut on the southwest coast of India. The expedition was a roaring success, securing tribute and submission from dozens of smaller kingdoms. Zheng He demonstrated that the new Ming dynasty not only possessed the power to enforce its authority but also the magnificent wealth to reward submission. The stage was set for 6 more voyages that would fundamentally redefine global maritime history. Diplomacy, warfare, and the capture of Kings 1407 to 1415. The subsequent expeditions led by Zheng He demonstrated that the Ming treasure fleet was not merely a ceremonial vessel for tribute, but a potent instrument of power capable of enforcing the emperor's mandate across the vast Indian Ocean. While diplomacy remained the primary tool, Zheng He did not hesitate to use military intervention to ensure the safety of his fleets and uphold the prestige of the Ming dynasty. The Secondo, 1407, 109, and third, 1409, 1411. Voyages largely followed the initial route, reaffirming ties with rulers in Southeast Asia Thailand, and the major Indian ports of Calicut and Cochin. However, these journeys were also critical in establishing Ming authority over the region's main threat, piracy. During the first voyage, Zheng He had encountered the notorious Chinese pirate Qin Zuyi, who commanded a massive fleet in the vital trade choke point of the Strait of Malacca, preying on all passing vessels. Qin Zuyi, who had originally feigned submission to the Ming Emperor, foolishly attempted to ambush the treasure fleet near Palembang. Upon He's returned from the first voyage, Zheng He, using superior planning, disciplined troops, and overwhelming firepower including explosive projectiles, successfully the engagement resulted in the sinking of 10 pirate ships, the destruction of many more, and the capture of Qin Zuyi himself. The pirate and his chief lieutenants were taken back to Nanjing, where they were publicly executed. This decisive action eliminated a major threat to maritime trade in the region and sent an unequivocal message. The Ming Emperor was the sole power of the seas, capable of protecting trade routes better than any local ruler. The third voyage saw another significant military intervention, this time in Ceylon, Sri Lanka. The ruler of Katalakdasvara displayed hostility toward the Ming mission, attempting to seize the treasure fleet and its vast cargo, while he and a small escort party were inland erecting a stone monument. This monument, the Gao trilingual inscription, was a diplomatic tool inscribed in Chinese, Tamil, and Persian, honoring the Buddha, local gods, and Allah, demonstrating the Ming's respectful tolerance of regional faiths. Upon learning of the planned attack, Zheng He swiftly mobilized his forces. He executed a brilliant maneuver, bypassing Alaksvara's main forces and launching a surprise attack on the capital, capturing Alaksvara and his entire family. This was not an act of territorial conquest, but a decisive intervention to restore order and protect the mission's dignity. Alaksvara was taken back to Nanjing in 1411. The Yongle Emperor, demonstrating the benevolence inherent in the tribute system, showed mercy, releasing the captured king and allowing the people of Ceylon to choose a new, more compliant ruler. The fourth voyage, 1413 to 1415, marked the most ambitious expansion yet, pushing the fleet far beyond India to the Arabian Peninsula and the coast of East Africa. The fleet visited the great trading port of Ormuz in modern-day Iran, which served as the gateway for goods from the Middle East and Europe. Even on this distant mission, military necessity arose. While passing through Sumatra, Zheng He intervened against Saga, a local prince who had usurped power from the rightful Ming-appointed ruler. Zheng He defeated Seconda's forces, captured him, and sent him back to China, once again ensuring the stability of a key tributary state. The sheer consistency and reach of these military responses reinforced a simple truth across the Indian Ocean. Allegiance to the Ming Emperor ensured peace and prosperity, while hostility invited overwhelming and swift retribution. The stage was now set for the final epic expansion to the farthest reaches of the known world. The apex of exploration, Arabia and the coasts of Africa. 1415 to 1422. The fourth voyage had already reached to the Persian Gulf, but the fifth 1417 to 1419 and sixth 1421 to 1422 voyages represented the absolute zenith of the Ming Empire's maritime reach. These missions were dedicated to pushing beyond the established trade hubs of India and Persia, seeking out the distant kingdoms of the Arabian Peninsula and the mysterious shores of East Africa. The scale of these voyages meant that the treasure fleet became a floating symbol of global connectivity. At the Arabian Peninsula, Zheng He's forces anchored at key ports, such as Aden in modern Yemen, a vital hub connecting the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea. Zheng He's Muslim heritage proved to be an invaluable diplomatic asset in these Islamic lands, facilitating dialogue and trade that would have been impossible for a traditional Han official. Though there is no definitive historical proof that Zheng He himself completed the Hajj, he dispatched trusted envoys to the holy city of Mecca, to deliver imperial gifts, thus paying tribute to the spiritual centers of his own faith, while upholding the emperor's diplomatic mission. The fleet then sailed southwest, achieving a monumental geographical expansion by visiting the sophisticated Swahili city along the East African coast. Key destinations included Malindi in modern Kenya and possibly Mogadishu in modern Somalia. These Swahili ports, long connected to the Arab and Indian trade networks, were astonished by the sheer size and technological superiority of the Chinese vessels. The diplomatic exchange involved gold, silks, and porcelain from China in return for unique local products and, most importantly, exotic animals, the ultimate expression of prestige for the imperial court. The collection of exotic tribute was the spectacular success of the African voyage, fulfilling the emperor's desire to display the cosmological reach of his mandate. The most famous example, and the one that created a sensation back in China, was the giraffe. Local rulers from Malindi presented the animal to Zheng He, who transported it back to the Ming court. The arrival of the giraffe in Nanjing was not just a zoological event, it was a profound political and theological statement. To the Yongle Emperor and his court, the giraffe was immediately interpreted as the mythical Chinese creature known as the Qilin ceiling, a unicorn like beast whose appearance was believed to herald an era of perfect peace, justice, and the blessing of heaven upon the ruler. By bringing the Qilin back to the capital, Zheng He provided the Yongle Emperor with the ultimate propaganda tool, proving that the emperor's righteous though usurped reign was fully sanctioned by the cosmos and recognized even by the most distant corners of the earth. However, even as the emperor basked in the glory of the Qilin and other exotic tributes like lions, zebras, and ostriches, the political climate back home was subtly shifting. The Yongle Emperor was deeply preoccupied with relocating the capital from Nanjing to Beijing, a massive, resource-draining, internal project. Simultaneously, the powerful, conservative scholar-bureaucrats, who viewed the expensive, Eunuch-led voyages as wasteful, unnecessary distractions that served foreign barbarians and distracted from traditional Confucian governance, continued to mount strong internal opposition. The great voyages were financially immense, and the resources poured into them could have been used for internal defense against the Mongols or for agricultural stability. The final, spectacular expeditions took place against a backdrop of increasing domestic skepticism that would soon threaten the entire maritime endeavor. The end of the Yongle era and the period of stagnation. 142, 214, 3, 1. Following the successful return of the sixth voyage in 1422, the grand maritime expeditions were temporarily halted. This pause was not due to a policy failure, but to a significant shift in the Yongle Emperor's priorities. His immediate focus was entirely consumed by the massive, costly project of relocating the capital from Nanjing to the new northern city of Beijing, and by the constant need to launch defensive land campaigns against the resurgent Mongols along the Great Wall frontier. However, the political and personal protections he enjoyed was absolute, dependent solely on the life of his patron. In August 1424, the Yongle Emperor died unexpectedly during a military campaign against the Mongols. His death removed the single greatest driving force behind the treasure fleets and unleashed the full force of the internal opposition that had been simmering for 2 decades. The Yongle Emperor's successor, his son, the Hongxi Emperor, Zhu Gawashi, was the embodiment of the conservative opposition. Hongxi was a Confucian scholar-bureaucrat who had always viewed the expensive, eunuch-led missions as an illegitimate and wasteful extravagance. He argued that the empire's resources should be spent on the internal welfare of the people, strengthening the border defenses like the Great Wall, and agricultural stability. The traditional concerns of the Confucian literati. The Hongxi Emperor immediately issued a decree that represented the first major historical policy reversal for the fleet. All further voyages were officially halted. The remaining treasure ships were allowed to rot in dry dock, and the massive shipbuilding program was cancelled. Resources were reallocated from the shipyards to internal projects. Zheng He himself was stripped of his high maritime command and was reassigned to the less glamorous internal position of defense, superintendent of none, overseeing the dismantling of the old capital's military garrison and the transfer of its defense system. Clear sign that the era of aggressive maritime power projection was over. However, the conservative triumph was short-lived. The Yongle Emperor, plagued by ill health, died only 9 months after ascending the throne 1425. The throne passed to his son, the Yongle Emperor, Zheng He, the Yongle Emperor, who had grown up during the era of the Great Voyages and admired his grandfather Yongle's assertive diplomacy, was keen to restore the prestige of the Ming Dynasty, which had quickly waned after the abrupt halt of the fleets. He understood that the absence of the treasure fleet in the Indian Ocean had allowed piracy and local feuding to flare up, disrupting the crucial tribute system and tarnishing the emperor's mandate. In 1430, the Yongle Emperor issued a landmark decree. Zheng He was to be restored to his command and was to lead a 7th and final grand voyage. The explicit purpose of this last mission was to reassert the imperial authority, remind the distant tributary states of the Ming's power, and ensure the local leaders renewed their oaths of submission. Despite being nearly 60 years old, a significant age for the time, Zheng He embraced his final task. The treasure fleet was hastily refurbished. Supplies were gathered, and the veteran Grand Director prepared to set sail one last time to secure the legacy of the Ming Empire, navigating not only the oceans, but also the treacherous political currents of the court. The final voyage, and the Admiral's death, 1431 to 1433, after a decade of stagnation. The 7th and final voyage of the treasure fleet, commissioned by the Yongle Emperor, set sail in 1431. This mission was the largest and most symbolic of all, involving nearly 300 ships and approximately 27,500 personnel. Its primary purpose was to emphatically signal the Ming Empire's renewed commitment to the tribute system, and to secure the lapsed submission of distant rulers. Despite being over 60 years old, monumental age for a commander in the 15th century, he was once again at the helm. The 7th voyage was perhaps the most geographically extensive. Unlike previous missions, which largely followed a single trunk route, this expedition saw the deployment of multiple separate squadrons, dispatched from the main fleet in the Indian Ocean to maximize coverage. While Zheng He sailed the primary route to the west, major detachments were sent elsewhere. The main fleet sailed to Ormuz and the great ports of India, including Calicut and Cochin, renewing diplomatic agreements and collecting tribute. Secondary fleets, separate squadrons were tasked with visiting the Red Sea ports, sending envoys deep into Mecca and Aden, while others traveled down the east coast of Africa to The mission was a resounding diplomatic success. It restored the fear and awe that the Ming fleet had commanded, stabilizing trade routes, and resulting in an unprecedented number of foreign envoys returning to China. Historical records confirm that representatives from 18 separate foreign states traveled back to Beijing in 1433, reaffirming their allegiance and bearing exotic gifts, proving that the Yongle Emperor's vision of re-establishing Ming dominance had been fulfilled. However, the final voyage came at a profound personal cost. Historical evidence strongly indicates that Zheng He did not return to China alive. Due to his advanced age, the harsh conditions of the prolonged journey, and the prevalence of disease aboard the massive vessels, it is widely believed that the Admiral died while the fleet was still overseas, most likely in 1433, either during a stopover in Calicut, India, or while traveling on the final leg of the return journey. The lack of a triumphant return for the fleet's greatest commander is deeply symbolic. Zheng He, the greatest maritime explorer China ever produced, died in the field, likely buried at sea or on foreign soil. A final, poignant farewell to the oceans he had tamed. The fleet returned to China under the command of Vice Admiral Wang Jinghong and other senior eunuch officers, bearing the final influx of tribute, but lacking its legendary leader. Upon the fleet's return in 1433, the Yongle Emperor declared the voyage a complete success, but he also made the final, definitive policy decision. There would be no further voyage. While Zhuangdi had supported the mission, he too was forced to confront the colossal expense and the unrelenting pressure from the Confucian scholar-bureaucrats, who argued that the empire's priorities lay inland, guarding the borders against the Mongols. The official records confirmed that the building of the treasure ships ceased entirely, and the massive vessels were left to slowly rot in dry dock. This decree of silence marked the end of the age of Chinese exploration. The decision was not driven by naval defeat or technological failure, but by an internal political victory of conservative, land-focused Confucian ideology over the expansive, eunuch-led, maritime vision of the Yongle Emperor. This internal policy shift would soon lead to the active destruction of the very records that detailed Zheng He's magnificent achievements, the Great Silence, the burning of the records, and the lost legacy. The successful return of the seventh voyage in 1433, despite the death of its admiral, secured the Ming Dynasty's prestige. However, the political forces opposing the costly maritime vision achieved a definitive victory. With the passing of the assertive Yongle Emperor in 1435, the conservative Confucian scholar-bureaucrats gained complete control over imperial policy. They immediately consolidated the decision to pursue a policy of internal focus and isolation. This shift was institutionalized through the strengthening of the Haijin Kaiking, or sea ban, which severely restricted and, in some periods, outright forbade private Chinese citizens from engaging in overseas trade or maritime travel. The vast resources previously dedicated to the treasure fleets were permanently redirected to the northern frontier to fight the Mongols and to the construction and maintenance of the Great Wall, cementing the Ming Dynasty's strategic focus on land defense. The greatest and most tragic loss stemming from this policy was the deliberate dismantling of the fleet itself. The largest treasure ships were too expensive to maintain. They were left to rot in their massive timbers, eventually cannibalized for smaller projects, or allowed to decay completely. The advanced naval technology and the unique skills of the vast corps of sailors, shipwrights, and navigators were intentionally allowed to atrophy, ensuring that the Ming would never again possess the capability for such large-scale oceanic endeavors. Crucially, the scholar-bureaucrats moved to destroy the historical memory of the expeditions. The missions were politically associated with the eunuchs, who were the rivals of the civil service, to prevent any future emperor from reviving the fleets. The detailed records, charts, and nautical logbooks of the 7 voyages, which represented the most sophisticated body of cartographic and naval knowledge in the world, were either sealed in the imperial archives or actively destroyed. The most infamous example occurred later in the 15th century, when an official named Lu Daxia famously claimed to have intentionally burned many of the surviving records to prevent their revival. This act effectively erased much of the concrete evidence of China's maritime supremacy. This self-imposed withdrawal created the Great Silence. Within a few decades of Zheng He's death, the oceans were deliberately emptied of the massive Ming fleets. The world's most powerful naval power intentionally retreated into isolation, concluding that the costs and distractions of global diplomacy outweighed the benefits. The historical consequence of this decision is profound. Just 50 to 80 years after the last treasure fleet had visited Calicut and the coast of Africa, European powers began their age of exploration. The ships of Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama were minuscule in comparison to the vessels that Zheng He commanded. Yet they found an Indian Ocean in Southeast Asia that, while still populated by powerful local rulers, no longer featured the overwhelming presence of the Ming superpower. China's voluntary retreat allowed the smaller, more aggressive, and commerce-driven European powers to eventually dominate global trade routes that the Ming had already mapped and controlled. Zheng He's legacy is therefore one of staggering, unmatched technological achievement, coupled with the political fragility of his position. He was a Muslim eunuch who served a Han emperor, leading fleets vastly superior to any contemporary navy, projecting peaceful power across half the globe. Yet, his monumental achievement was effectively erased by the political ideology of his own government. His story remains a powerful reminder that history is not defined solely by technological capability, but by the political will to use Edo will, that in the 5th-10th century, the great Chinese Empire consciously chose to abandon.